if I could read a book a week, oh my goodness, and then I got around people that were reading a book a day, and I'm going, what? You guys are actually reading, that many books a year. And I thought, how unbelievable. But the breakthrough really came through when I actually had the opportunity to have lunch with a billionaire. I walked in, I didn't know a single person in there, and I see these people playing, people lined up on the wall, and I go, what in the world is this? So this older lady sees me standing there. She's like, hey, she was like, you want to play? And I was like, well, I don't know. I saw the flyer. I came in. It looks pretty interesting. She goes, well, I've got a game today, but you come back tomorrow and I'll show you how to play. I show up the next day, and for 3 hours straight, this lady is showing me pickleball. She's in her mid to late 60s and just killing me. For that next hour, I've got out my content with John, and we're going line by line on his content, my content, and he's correcting, saying, no, here, I would go here with it. And I remember looking out that plane, looking at John writing, on my content, on his content, and going, this is the craziest thing in the world, knowing all I saw when I looked out that window was me inside the basement of a church, to now being on an airplane with John, co-writing content, just really surreal.
Turn this up, turn this up.
Your professional development is one of the keys to your career success. When you combine your desire to grow with actionable steps, your journey to success becomes an incredible reality.
Hi, I'm Paul Ferranbi, and welcome to IncrediPaul Leadership, where we learn how to become the most incredible versions of ourselves by learning from each other. Today, I have the honor of having Chris Robinson on the show. He is a founding partner of Maxwell Leadership Certified Team, and he's currently the Executive Vice President of Maxwell Entrepreneur Solutions. He is the product of the product, leading a global team of over 50,000 speakers, coaches, and trainers. And if you thought that was a lot, he also has 6 kids as well. So I'm sure we'll get into that. But Chris, how about you introduce yourself the way you would do it?
Hey, Paul, thanks so much for having me. First and foremost, it's an honor to be on here with you today, and looking forward to answering questions and adding value how we can. I think you really summed it up. In your introduction there. Most importantly, as being the father of 6. So those 6 children happened in 3 pregnancies. We got triplets that just turned 15 this past week. I've got a 10-year-old that will be 11 this week. And then I have 7-year-old twin girls as well. That rounds out the 6. So 6 kids, 3 pregnancies. That's a lot of kids real fast.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys like to be pretty efficient with the
Right.
triplets
That
and
we
the
do.
twins there. Yeah. Well,
But
you started talking about your family, so let's stick on that for a little bit. I think is that part of your why, or what really drives you with all that you do?
Yeah, well, of course, the kids are easy why for people to do. I wouldn't say like, oh my goodness, I wake up every single morning and every single thing I do is for my children, and every single
Hmm.
thing. I can't say that. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people may have that way. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my kids,
Yeah.
but my purpose is really larger than my kids. I believe in the fact that I
Hmm.
simply want to add value to people every single day that I wake up. So getting opportunities just like this here today, that's the why. Is because I want to be able to encourage somebody today. I want to be able to equip somebody today. I want to be able to help someone see themselves a little bit further than where they are today, tomorrow. And so when I think about my why and what drives me, it's that deeper call inside. And again, love my kids, but I can't say like, oh my goodness, that's the only reason why I wake up in the morning. No, no, no. I got to add value to people every single day, including them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that transparency there. For us, yeah, yes, your kids are important, but they're a part of the bigger picture of adding value to people, as
Yeah,
you all say at Maxwell Leadership.
absolutely.
So, talk to me a little bit more about your journey into even into Maxwell Leadership. I know I just mentioned to people that you're an executive vice president, leading
Yeah.
coaches and trainers of 50,000 people. But I know you didn't start there. So, wherever
No.
you want to start, just talk to me about your journey.
Yeah, well, I started my journey many years ago. I mean, I think that was probably around 2001. I took my
Mhm.
very first Maxwell course. So if we look at 2001, about 23 years ago,
Wow.
which is crazy when I think about it, because what that means is that I've spent more than half of my life studying John Maxwell principles, more of my
Mm.
life studying those principles than I haven't studied those principles at this point,
Wow.
being 44 now. And, it really just simply started because I wanted to get promoted on my job. I was
Mm.
part of an organization that was growing really fast, and I knew that I wanted to stand out in that organization. So I began taking a course at the local church where I would come inside of a classroom, I would watch a VHS of John Maxwell, and then I would go back into the workplace and I would apply these principles. And that really grew um, an awareness, a desire, and a passion to add value to people. And so it really became my mission inside of my current job to really figure out how can I be the manager that creates the most managers? How can I be the leader that
Mm.
creates the most leaders? And when I shifted my focus in being the star and trying to
Mm.
become a star creator, in
Mhm.
the leadership space, that really exploded my career as a sales manager and allowed for me to advance really fast throughout this organization. And that
Mm.
expanded and continued my growth as I continued to read books, as I continued to go to conferences and events, eventually evolved into hearing the idea that you can get paid to speak. And, that's when my mind ran
Mm.
off, but it didn't take me away from the place that I was at. I just knew that I had a place to grow where I was. And so I
Okay.
continued to focus to grow where I was. And eventually, over time, I made the transition out to coaching, speaking, training full time for a living. And
Mm.
the Maxwell certified team was really the crux of that because I didn't know how to monetize a soft skill like
Mm.
leadership development. Like a company's going to pay me to do that. I didn't, I couldn't comprehend it at the time. I was
Yeah.
what, maybe I was young, and so I couldn't get it. But it's been a long journey of watching VHSs to going to conferences to reading books to adding value today to people all around the world.
That is absolutely incredible. Just even talk about VHS. I know a lot of people in my audience, they probably do not know what a VHS is. I mean, I know what a VHS
Right,
is, but
yeah,
we will even get into that. But the
right,
fact that you were able to start there with the different
yeah,
courses, and I know you mentioned your local church as well. I think that was a time when we were both attending Church on the Rock.
yeah.
But
That's
that is
correct.
absolutely phenomenal. That just the steps that you took, that you mentioned that it was in your current job. So it's not like you were already an entrepreneur and you were trying to do all these things. You applied it where you were, and that has taken
Yeah.
you so far. Are you looking for a place to continue to grow and develop, especially in your leadership? How about connecting with others who feel the same way? Hi, I'm Paul Ferrandi, aka IncrediPaul, and I've got great news for you. The IncrediPaul community is for people who desire to become the most incredible versions of themselves. The community is for individuals who are goal-driven and action-oriented. This community is dedicated to leadership and personal growth, especially in going deeper in your career, starting a business, or developing a business. Join me in becoming the most incredible version of yourself. Go to incredipaul.org/community to join the waitlist and sign up. INCREDI Paul.org/community. Join the waitlist. I can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of people miss it. I've known for a very long time since I was a child that I was going to be an entrepreneur, a person that
Mm.
ran or worked my own schedule and ran businesses. And I knew that, but I think that a lot of people take for granted the opportunity that they have exactly where they are. Exactly where you are right now is a phenomenal place to practice the skills that you want to utilize somewhere else. So what you're learning right now is really just a foundation and a building block of who you're becoming if you're intentional with it. Because otherwise, if you don't pay attention, if you don't integrate the things that you're learning outside to the inside role that you have right now, then you'll just keep doing the same things and keep going around the same mountains. But when I made that shift of, oh man, I think I want to speak one day. Well, every single sales meeting, every single week I had a sales meeting that was already on my schedule. So I was giving a motivational conference every single week. I was putting together teaching lessons. I was putting together plans, and I was training. I would bring the managers together and say, hey, let's do a 1 day motivational workshop. And we would put together a workshop. So I was lining up the speakers. I was giving them their time frame. I was exercising that inside of my role as a volunteer at Church on the Rock there in Missouri. And every opportunity that I could to exercise the skill that I wanted to get, I was using that. And so many people miss it. They think, well, I have to leave this and just go do this. No, there's a bridge in between the two called skill set and time that has to be developed in order for you to make that jump. And so I think too many people go, well, it's just the time. I'm going to jump and that's it. No, no, no. Build where you are and bridge into where you want to go.
Build where you are and bridge it to where you want to go. Couldn't have said it better myself. I think I really think it's good that you mentioned that, because a lot of my audience they're more like either college students or young professionals, and I know because I feel like I'm there myself. We can underestimate the amount of time it can take to build the skills or to develop our leadership or get to where we want to go. Not to say that we do see people that are seemingly successful overnight, which that's a whole nother topic, that there's really nothing that happens overnight. A lot of stuff happening in the background. But what is some advice you would give to someone who, like you were mentioned that you knew you wanted to get paid to speak, and I you know you talked about building where you are, and do you leverage some of those sales meetings that you were doing? What would you tell someone who doesn't even know where to start? What would be the first thing they should start off with?
Well, if they don't know I mean, you have to get clear on what it is that you want to do, first of all. I mean, otherwise, you're just going to drift into whatever opportunity comes your way. It'll look like this. Your parents, Paul, know that you're looking for a job. And instead of saying, Paul, what is it? What is your vision for your life? And what would you like to do? They say, well, Paul needs a job. Paul, I've got a friend at the Amazon warehouse that can get you a job, and it's going to pay X amount of dollars. It's got these benefits. You just go do that now until you figure out what it is that you want to do. Now, this is the mistake that people make, and especially as I would caution young professionals, is this is the biggest mistake, is taking on a job that does not develop the skill that you want to do in the future. And so you want to take jobs for what you learn at an early age, not what you earn. You want to take jobs for what you learn, not what you earn. And so what I mean by that is, hey, look, what are you going to learn? Like I've got 15-year-old kids right now, and they're starting to look at jobs, and I'm kind of like, and one of them says, well, I want to go work at the Shark Shack ice cream place. And I'm like, well, what are you going to learn at the ice cream place? Maybe deal with some people. Yeah, okay. Now, if he's saying to me intentionally that, hey, I want to go develop my people skills, and while I'm there, I want to develop talking with people, interacting with people. Well, then great. Let's do that for a degree. But are there other things that he could be doing that can help enhance that or help strengthen that? And so when you're looking at that job, does it line up? Now, he'll also tell you, well, Dad, I think that I want to be an architect. And so the question is, well, what can we be doing that will get you around people in the architecture industry to get you inside of that space? I'd rather him go work for free inside of an architecture firm than to go scoop ice cream for how many ever hours each week, because now when he's inside the room, he's going to learn the language, he's going to learn the look, he's going to learn the feel. How do they talk like this? Why do they walk like this? What, you're going to be able to see the intangible things that allow for people to progress. And so the advice I would have, whatever it is that you want to do, do everything you can to get into that environment, not looking at the pay today, but looking at the environment, the experience, and the exposure that you can gain by being in the room.
Wow. That is phenomenal advice. It sounds like a lot of intentionality, which I know there's a lot of things that is preached at John Maxwell Leadership, and I think it's the first law from the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, a law of intentionality.
Right.
But really understanding, I like what you mentioned that first off, if you don't know what to do, just do something. And then as
Right.
you start to do something, when you realize there is something you want to do, be intentional in the skills that you're developing, the skills that you want to do, because it could just be people skills like you mentioned, but if you want to be an
Yeah.
architect, you need to learn those technical skills even if you're not necessarily
Right.
earning anything.
Right. That's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Love it.
really good. So I know with Maxwell Leadership, there's a lot of different books, a lot of different resources. I've heard you speak a couple of times, so I at least you could correct me if I'm wrong. I think your favorite book is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership.
Oh yeah, hands
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm gonna switch it up a little bit and ask you what's your second
Okay.
favorite book?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you 5 books that I read every single year,
Okay.
because I think that they're foundational to just growth overall. Obviously the first is 21 Laws of Leadership. That book is probably the most foundational leadership book out there. It's 25 years old this year, and has sold more copies than any leadership book ever written. But no matter what leadership book you go to read, you can always tie it back to the laws. And when you're reading the book, oh, that's this law, it's this law, it's this law, and so they all tie back. So it's such a foundational book. So I highly recommend that to everyone. As a book. The second book would be the 15 Laws of Growth. Because every single year, one of the things that we do is we reset. We say, okay, hey, it's a new year, it's a new me, it's a this, and then we don't check the game plan, the personal growth plan. And so that's so important to have a place to check your personal growth plan. And that gives you a roadmap of what to do moving forward. And so the 15 Laws of Growth. Third book that I read every single year is called 12 Pillars by Jim Rohn. Now, it's a small fable book on personal growth. It's just a great, simplified personal growth book that I just love. That's by Jim Rohn and Chris Widener. The fourth book would be another fable book called The Greatest Salesman in the World by Og Mandino. And this is a great fable book, just a great story. But again, the principles are the same, and they're layered, what we call layered learning. A lot of people think, well, I keep hearing the same thing over and over again. Well, great. Okay, but what are you doing with the same things that you're hearing over and over again? And when you're hearing those things over again, it's what we call layered learning. And if you get
Mm,
enough of those layers on top of there, you really begin to grow. And the last book that I read each year is Think and Grow Rich as well too, by
uh,
Napoleon Hill. Again, one of the personal growth pillars of books. And so those would be the 5 that I read, and are some of my favorites. But I've read over 1,000 plus books, if not two
wow.
by now. But I don't count at this point. I got a problem, I'm reading. I got a passion, I'm reading. And so that's how we move through content.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing those books. A few of those books I've read, but I like what you mentioned about reading it again and really the layered learning that you mentioned, not just hearing it, but also applying it. I've heard you
Right.
say
Yeah.
before that the most dangerous thing you could say is I've heard that before. I think
Yeah.
you
That's
said it at
correct.
our marketplace. I think you said it also when you talked
Yeah.
to our young adults group. So I think it's
Right.
really crucial that you mentioned that layered learning and that the fact is someone of your status, what you've done, you don't need to read these books every year, but the fact that you continue to
Yes, I
do it
do.
is powerful. It says something.
Yeah. Yeah, the day I don't need to read them every single year is the day I start going downhill. You got to
Mm,
keep growing. You got to keep reading. You got to keep learning, because otherwise, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards. So,
yeah.
reading is critical to everything that I do.
Awesome, awesome. So, with reading, I know you mentioned that reading is critical. Have you always been an avid reader, or was that something you kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, developed that along the way. I was
Okay.
not a reader at all. In fact, I did not read my first book until I was actually kicked out of college. Is when I read my first book, and it was when I had worked for a company. After I got kicked out of college, I had to go find a job, and the first job I saw was in the newspaper that said, "Do you like to travel? Do you like interacting with people? Would you like upward potential?" It was a great little well written ad. And so
Yeah.
I get there, and it is a perfume and cologne sales job with the aspiration of becoming a manager and having your own distribution center. And
Wow.
so every single day, we would go inside of this office, and we would read out of Think and Grow Rich. They would read a
Mm,
chapter out of Think and Grow Rich or do a teaching from Think and Grow Rich. And this was the first book that I had in my hand. And this is what was conditioning me in personal growth. And then at
mm.
the end of that 1 hour session of training, they would hand us a box of perfume and cologne. And then your job was to go out, sell the box, come back at 5 o'clock with cash and what cologne you had left over. Okay.
Wow. That's high stakes.
And so, right, it's high stakes. It's high stakes. There was no pay unless you came home with the empty box. I mean, you had to come home
Wow.
with the empty box. And so that was one of the best and worst times of my life. But it taught me sales. I mean, it
Mm,
taught me sales, in that capacity, and so it was good. But that was actually the first book that I read, and
mm,
I really didn't get into reading after that. And as I attended Church on the Rock, Pastor Blunt is very, very high on personal growth and development,
mhm,
so that started to seep in, and eventually, so I was starting to read. And I'd read like 3, 4, 5 books in a year, and thought, oh man, I was cooking. Then, I would hear about people reading a book a month, and I was like, oh man, a book a month. Like, oh, that would be, if I read a book a month, that would be awesome. Then, I got around people reading, a book a week. And I'm like, what? A book a week? This makes no sense. If I could read a book a week, oh my goodness, and then I got
mm.
around people that were reading a book a day, and I'm going,
Wow.
what? You guys are actually reading, that many books a year. How unbelievable. But the breakthrough really came through when I actually had the opportunity to have lunch with a billionaire.
Are you wondering what's next? Has everything you tried failed? Or maybe you just feel stuck? Then coaching might be right for you. The coaching relationship is a relationship totally centered on you. If you're tired of running on the hamster wheel of life and want to start to see results, reach out to IncrediPaul for help. So what are you waiting for? Go to incredipaul.org/coaching, IncrediPaul.org/coaching, or at I am IncrediPaul on all my socials. Or you can click the link in the bio for your free coaching session. I want to make sure you become the most incredible version of yourself.
Peter Daniels, who was an
Wow.
Australian businessman. He was 75 at the time. I would probably say he's in his 90s now.
Mm.
But I asked him a question, what's the one thing that would have the greatest impact on my life? And before I could answer the question, he answered for me. He said, Chris, read. And, of course, I'm sitting there like, oh, okay, yeah, I've heard that before. But he
Mm.
says, look, I attribute my billions of dollars to reading over 5,000 books in my lifetime. And I was
Wow.
illiterate at the age of 27, and he was 75. And so that's when I started a real hot pursuit of reading. That was further, I guess, pushed into my head or hit over the head with the idea when I saw Dr. Dennis Kimbrough in Atlanta, Georgia for the first time. And Dr. Dennis Kimbrough actually rewrote the Think and Grow Rich from the African American perspective and actually interviewed hundreds of millionaire African Americans. And he was teaching at that time, and he talked about reading and the importance in it. And he talked about a time where he was interviewing one of the millionaires and it went into their home and he was gawking at their stuff. And the gentleman kind of caught him gawking and says, hey, do you like what I have here? And and Dr. Kimbrough's like, well, yeah, I like what you have here. He goes, well, you can have what I have, but you have to outread me. And Dr. Dennis Kimbrough said this. He says, I realized that as I was interviewing these millionaires, is that the larger the house, the smaller the TV, the bigger the house, the larger the libraries. And at that time, when I had heard that, I was in an 800 square foot apartment, 55-inch TV, with the big back on it. I mean, the
Yeah.
big
I
tube 55
remember
inch TV.
those.
Not,
Yeah.
it didn't hang on the wall, it blocked the entire wall,
Yeah.
and not a book could be found in my house. And so
Mm,
that's when I had what I call my TV turnaround, and I began to focus on the books versus the TV. And I
mm.
believe that was one of the greatest decisions that I had ever made in my life, that changed everything for me.
That's a phenomenal story. And what's really encouraging to me, and I'm sure to my audience as well, is that you were not someone that really read at all. You said that the
No.
you said the first book you really read was after you got kicked out of college, and then or you dropped out. Or not kicked out. Don't put words in words in your mouth.
I was kicked out. I was kicked
Okay,
out.
okay, but
I was invited to leave. I was invited to leave.
invited. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Invited to leave college, and just yeah. I
Oh,
think that's really it's really good what you mentioned about putting yourself in the right atmosphere to even want to read. Because I know you mentioned like right after you left college or were asked to leave from college, you are at Church on a Rock. Pastor Blunt talks about being lifelong learners, continuing to learn. And there were these people along the way that you kept interacting with, kept planting the seed. And it feels like and you could tell me, it feels like with Peter Daniels, with the billionaire, like they even let you finish asking your question and told you, Chris, you need to read.
right.
So what is something that you're reading right now?
Yeah, right now, the book that I'm reading right now, recently finished up, and is actually one I have it right here. It's
Oh wow.
called Fans First by Jesse Cole. Great book. This is one, so I read books in a few different ways. Um, some books I read cover to cover. Some books I will listen to audio on double speed. Some books I will use as a reference and as a guide, and I'll keep coming back to it because I want to continue to ask myself questions on what I'm reading or a specific topic. And so this is one of those books that I've kind of been in and out of. I read it cover to cover, but I keep referring back to it because of things that I'm dealing with inside of the organization with Maxwell Leadership and how we're trying to always make things better. So this would be the number one book right now. Then, of course, I'm going through the 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth because it's the first of the year. Not only am I reading it, I'm also teaching it as well too right now. And so those are the two right now that I'm in. And then I'll move on. And I go through phases throughout the year where it's not, oh, I'm going to read a book a week. Like I read books based on two areas, either my problem that I'm trying to solve or a passion that I have. So either your problems or your passions, because in that way that'll move it through the content. Because a lot of people may have looked up and go, "Oh, great, Fans First, that's a great book. Let me go out and get that book." Well, if this doesn't solve a problem that you're currently dealing with, or your passion, this isn't the book for you right now. Great book, phenomenal book, but it may not be for you. And that was one of the early mistakes that I made was I would get around a successful person. I would say, "Hey, what books are you reading right now?" They would say the books. I would go out and get them. I would read them, but they were hard to get through because I wasn't dealing with that specific thing in my life. So I began to shift to read through my problems or my passion, and then that way that drives me through the content versus chasing what somebody successful says, "Hey, this is what I'm reading." Now, nothing wrong with any of those books
Hmm.
that are recommended by successful people, but you got to filter that so that you're spending your time going in the direction that you want to go.
Wow. Spend the time going in the direction you want to go.
Yeah,
Because like what you mentioned, if he's coming back to this being intentional, the intentionality
yeah,
piece. And that
yeah.
book I've heard of that book, and correct me if I'm wrong. Jessica, is he the one that started the Savannah Bananas?
That's correct. That's
That's
correct.
good. Awesome. So that's really good. And even where you talked about being out of your problems or your passions, I know that's
Yeah,
something that I'm sure you, among many people listening as well, there's everyone is inundating you with so much content, videos, podcasts, do this, do that, but really being
right.
intentional and filtering it through what you need to do and what you
Yeah,
where you need to go. And I think that's one of the reasons having either a mentor or a coach is so important, so that you can help with that. And I know that's something that
yeah,
Maxwell Leadership does, really focuses on. If you can tell
yeah.
us more about what like the Maxwell Leadership coaches are and how you even got involved with that.
Yeah, well, Maxwell Leadership Certified Team is really geared towards helping people add value to people through
Hmm.
either speaking, whether that's on stages, webinars, podcasts, etc., and then through coaching as well too.
Hmm.
So going through what some either executive coaching, life coaching, or business coaching as the disciplines that we work within, and I got involved with it with the very first group that came through when John offered it for the first time in March of 2011. And for me, what I was trying to do is I had that goal and desire to speak for a living. I thought, oh my
Hmm.
goodness, this would be great to train people, to build leaders, to build people. I know I'm a natural encourager, and I love seeing people advance. But what Maxwell Certified Team gave me was a content that's tested, proven that I could use and build upon. So I was able to
Hmm.
take John Maxwell's content, build upon it. I mean, which sounds crazy. I'm building upon John Maxwell's work, but I should say I'm personalizing it
Yeah.
to me in my life and being able to utilize it
Hmm.
as a base to start. So instead of going in and saying, hey, you know, I'm Chris Robinson, I'm a leadership coach, and I'm going to tell you Chris's 7 ways to be a better leader. No, let me walk you through the 21 laws, the most,
Hmm.
bought, most sold leadership book on the planet. And I get to use that as a door opener and as a base of my conversation and my teaching. It also gave me the skill development as a speaker. So there's speaker training to actually help you develop the skill of speaking. And then the coaching was critical as well too, because that allowed me to learn and engage in a process that really helped people see themselves for who they are, how to help break through the certain issues that they may be having. And so it helped me not only with content, not only with coaching and speaking, but then also community. With that environment piece being so important, I mean, trying to figure out how to be a speaker on my own was daunting, but to be
Hmm.
inside of a community of people that were actually in pursuit and doing what it is that I wanted to do, it was life giving. So for me, it's been a life changer. Like I said, I think the big decision of reading was a big one, but
Hmm.
becoming part of the Maxwell Certified Team, that was a huge one as well too.
Absolutely. I love being part of the Maxwell Leadership Certified Team, and then having you to look to as a leader of
Yeah,
leaders is phenomenal. The example you provide, and that you're always transparent with your story. It is absolutely remarkable what you've been able to accomplish, but how humble you are as well.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I know we've been
Okay.
talking a lot about
Yeah,
leadership and
yeah,
what you've been able to do, but I want to talk about something I know that you're a little bit passionate about, which is pickleball. So,
oh yeah.
yeah. So, how did you even get into pickleball? I know pickleball has been exploding over the last couple of years, but I think you've been
Yeah,
doing it a little bit longer than that. Like, why
yeah.
pickleball? How did you get involved in it?
Yeah, pickleball is I love the game of pickleball. It's phenomenal. I got into pickleball so my daughter was playing on a basketball team, and during these practices, the dads kind of line up on against the wall there, and they had chairs lined up, and I was just sitting there, and stepped on something and kind of just slipped, and it was this flyer, and it was for pickleball inside this gym. And so I pick up the flyer and I look at the flyer and I look at the guy next to me. I go, pickleball? What in the world is this? He goes, oh, I think it's something with the paddle and with some type of ball. but it's like it's some game for old people. I said,
For
okay,
most people.
interesting. I was like, well, it looks like they're going to be here tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
Mhm.
And so I was like, I think I'm going to come check it out. I think I might like pickleball. And so I come back the next morning, and there's not a parking spot at the gym. I mean, there's
Wow.
not a parking spot. People are parked on the grass. I walk in, and it is people lined up all the way around the wall. And I didn't know a single person in the room. Now, this was in Lake St. Louis, Missouri.
Wow.
And this was very odd for me at that time to be able to walk in a place with a lot of people and not recognize one person. Okay.
Wow.
Like that was pretty odd for me at the time.
Mm.
And I walked in, I didn't know a single person in there, and I see these people playing, people lined up on the wall, and I go, "What in the world is this?" So this older lady sees me standing there. She's like, "Hey," she was like, "You want to play?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. I saw the flyer. I came in. It looks pretty interesting." She goes, "Well, I've got a game today, but you come back tomorrow and I'll show you how to play."
All right.
So I go online, I'm looking up every video. There wasn't very many videos on pickleball at the time,
Mhm.
and I began looking at the videos of how to play. I go to the store and I buy a paddle, which is crazy because now it's like I got a paddle on my desk. I mean, we, we got them
That's
everywhere. I
awesome.
buy a paddle. I show up the next day, and for 3 hours straight, this lady is showing me pickleball. She's in her mid to late 60s and just killing me. And I'm
Did you
going, what
say
in the
three
world is this game?
hours?
3 hours.
What?
3 hours. I mean, and I went home and I am wore out because I
Yeah.
hadn't moved like that. And
Hmm.
I just fell in love. So the next week, that same week, I hired a coach. I
Mm.
went to my very first clinic, and I
Wow.
began learning the game. And so now today, I compete in tournaments. I'm actually a certified teaching pro as well
What?
too. And so I love the game of pickleball. Yeah.
Man. Also, I
Yeah.
do want to add because I know as we've been talking, you pulled out the pickleball paddle. There's the book that you're reading. You pulled out. I did not plan it. We did not plan that. I did not know you had any of that stuff out in front of you. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, but you are a certified coach for pickleball as well. You said, "Wow,
That's correct. That's correct.
how do you find the time to do all this? That's phenomenal." Yeah.
Well, here's the thing, Paul. Here's the thing, Paul. We all do exactly what we want to do. We either find a way or we find an excuse, but
Mhm.
we do exactly what we want to do at the end of the day.
Wow, that is very true.
Yeah.
Very true. We do what we want to do, and really, what you have shared throughout this episode is really being intentional and finding out what you want to do, and then seeking out people along the way. So I know you've mentioned John a few times, that being John Maxwell. For those who didn't catch on to that, how has
Yeah.
your relationship with John kind of changed through the years, going from watching him on VHS to I know I was at L2L just this past year, sharing the stage with him. So kind of talk through that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of surreal knowing that I was watching somebody on VHS 20 years ago, and
Mm.
the number one, not just anybody, the number one leadership guru in the world,
Mm-hmm.
to be watching him 20 plus years ago on a VHS tube TV. And it didn't really hit me till about, I want to say, in 21, because he's mentored me since 2016 personally, one on one.
Wow.
He's been a
Wow.
mentor to me as I became one of the faculty members. And then I've had the opportunity to be in close proximity for dinners and events with him throughout the years. But it was kind of a surreal moment, I believe back in 21, where I was working on a new project for content, where I was building off of his content on attitude. And
Mm.
there was a flight that we had took. It was me and John Maxwell alone on a private jet. We had went to North Carolina, him and Mark Cole to go speak at an event. We dropped Mark off in Atlanta, and then John and I take back off 7 minutes later to head back down to South Florida where we both live. And for that next hour, I've got out my content with John, and we're going line by line on his content, my content,
Wow.
and he's correcting, saying, no, here, I would go here with it. And I remember looking out that plane, looking at John writing, on my content, on his content, and going, this is the craziest thing in the world,
Mm.
knowing all I saw when I looked out that window was me inside the basement of a church, to
Wow.
now being on an airplane with John, co-writing content, just really surreal. And so it's a place of growth
Mm.
and continuing to grow and following that dream and that passion to help people.
Yeah, that dream to add value to people because people are valuable. So
Yeah,
good.
indeed.
So we're about out of time, but I don't know if there's anything that we haven't shared about you personally, Maxwell Leadership, or pickleball that you want to talk about.
No, I think we covered a lot of ground there, a lot of stuff to pull out of there. And again, my hope and my desires that I did add value today, and that again that people are feeling a little bit better than they were before they started this podcast here today.
Absolutely, I'm sure they are. Yeah, from what you shared, from where you started with not being an avid reader to now read over, was it 1,000 or 2,000 books? Over 1,000 books,
Yeah,
definitely over 1,000
yeah,
books. To be really intentional in your growth, in your journey, being humble in it. And I think that's a big thing that I want to draw from this episode, is that at the level you are at, like no one would question, like, if you were busy talking to clients or doing other things that you weren't reading as much or cutting back. But the fact that I
yeah,
asked about what you were reading, you pulled it out, and like, this is what I'm
yeah,
reading, I'm going back and forth. That just speaks to your leadership and your attitude. We didn't even get into that you're the attitude for the best person that shows attitude as far as John Maxwell's concerned for clear. We didn't even get into that. So people are going to have to check something else to learn more about that. But thank you so much, Chris, for being on the show. I'll make sure that how people can get in contact with you is linked to your LinkedIn. I think that an email was shared. So I'll make sure people can get connected with you, and definitely with Maxwell Leadership, because you all are doing an amazing thing. And I am so excited that I get to be a small part of it, as to be the legs to his legacy, as John Maxwell says.
right. I love it. I love it. That's
Awesome.
awesome, Paul. Thanks so much for having me today.
Absolutely. And for everyone else that's been listening, I hope you got something from Chris's story, something that stuck out to you, something that you can reflect on, continue to learn and do, so you can keep being incredible.
Be sure to rate and review this podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform. We'll see you here next time. And be incredible. Incredible.